Good evening, everyone. My name is Keith Williams, and on behalf of the Lancaster Conservancy, welcome to tonight's Nature Hour. Lancaster Conservancy's mission is to provide wild and forested lands and clean waterways for our community forever. For 50 years, our organization has sought out natural places that are so precious and beautiful that they must be protected. Our stewardship team then works to restore these special places by creating trails, planting trees, and removing invasives. These preserves are then open for you and I to use to hike, hunt, fish, and birdwatch 365 days a year. Special places like Shanks Ferry, Hellam Hills, Kelly's Run, Otter Creek, Climbers Run, Welsh Mountain, and many others are protected forever. We launched Nature Hour with the goal of bringing an assortment of local and regional experts directly to your home with presentations that help us better understand the Conservancy's work and the work of our community partners. The format for tonight's lecture is a 40-minute presentation followed by 20 minutes of question and answer. If you have questions, please use the Q&A button on your screen, and we'll do our best to have them answered by the end of the presentation. This is the first lecture of our 2022 fall-winter season. Our next Nature Hour will be October 12th on the history and health of Pennsylvania woods with our very own forester, Eric Roper. You can learn more and pre-register for this lecture, along with a number of other interpretive events by going to lancasterconservancy.org and go to upcoming events. The Conservancy is blessed with incredible corporate support, and tonight we want to recognize our annual sponsors, who include Clark Associates, Stauffer's of Kissel Hill, Lakshwama, Electron Energy Corporation, Eurofins, Dart Container, Vertu Associates, and Penstone. Without their support, much of the Conservancy's work, including Nature Hours, would not be possible. And now I'd like to introduce tonight's Nature Hour. The Trees Remember, a historical trilogy, written and presented by Joyce Kieffer. Drawing on her career as a nurse in women's health and inspired by the forests of Juniata County, where she helped build a log cabin, Joyce envisioned a young woman's coming-of-age story beginning her journey to become a healer, set against the backdrop of the state's burgeoning lumber industry as thousands of acres of virgin timber fell to ever-wealthier lumber barons. Set in the late 1800s and early 1900s, The Trees Remember is a historical trilogy about her odyssey from her family farm in the forest foothills to the Johns Hopkins Hospital training school for nurses, and then back again to her forest homeland where she works for the town doctor caring for people whose only hospital is a 7-hour horseback ride away, and in the primitive and very dangerous lumber camps. The Trees Inspire, The Trees Endure, and The Trees Remember are about love, courage, and above all, truth. Although the novels are set in over a century ago, Joyce addresses issues that are certainly relevant to today: environmental issues, racial issues, socioeconomic, and gender. Superimposed on these themes are the lush, beautiful forests and the flora and fauna that call them home, and the rich cultural stories of life in rural Pennsylvania, where farming is a way of life, and the Native American wisdom and respect for the plants, soil, and water we all share. So Joyce, thanks for joining us. And really, thanks for a great trilogy. I mean, I've not gotten the third book yet, but I've got, because it's not out yet. It's coming out in November. But the first two are amazing. And I'm really looking forward to having you tell us about, your process and what you learned along the way, and maybe delving into some more of those themes that we just discussed.
Thank you. Well, everyone, greetings from Mechanicsburg, where I sit in my little cottage that is almost as charming as the mountain cabin where I began my story over 7 years ago. Keith told you a little bit about my historical trilogy, The Trees Remember, but it's basically the story of a young woman who grows up in Juniata County in the late 1800s, and she dreams of becoming more than a farm girl, but she gets caught in a conflict between those who want to clear cut the virgin forest surrounding her home and those who want to save them. But it's also a love story. The protagonist, Rebecca Wagner, loves the mountains and the forest. She loves her family and the mysterious Native American woman who teaches her how to use plants and trees as medicine. She loves her hometown sweetheart, but she falls in love with a promising doctor at Johns Hopkins. But it's also a story of conflict between the farmers and the increasingly wealthy lumber barons, between those whose skin is different a different color, and those who consider themselves superior. It's a conflict between the haves and the have-nots, between those who think their God is superior to the God of those who believe differently, and between those who think their gender gives them authority over those of another. And lastly, it is a conflict between telling the truth or living a lie. There are 5 major themes throughout my trilogy: environmental, racial, socioeconomic, gender, and cultural. And although the book dates from 1897 to 1905, all of these key elements are just as relevant today as they were over 117 years ago. I'm going to start with the environmental because that is something that I am probably the most passionate about. The environmental effects of clear-cutting the world's forests have been well documented. I'm going to tell you right up front, I am not a forester, and I am not an expert on forestry, but I do know some stuff. I use several sources as the background for my story and for the account of forestry practices at that time. And then I added a lot of my own. One book that almost brought me to tears was this one. It was written in 1993, and it's called Clear Cut: The Tragedy of Industrial Forestry. There are pictures here that just are so stark and so jarring that I just can barely keep my composure. I know that you can't see them very well, but some are in Ohio, some are in West Virginia. And even though this forest, the cutting was done in 1993, I can tell you these forests still bear the scars of that industrial cutting of that time. In fact, in Ohio, the Ohio Valley bioregion, Ohio once had 95% of its total land was forested. When this book was written, it was down to 30%. So I would imagine it is really less than 30% today. The other area was in West Virginia, and that is the Central Appalachian bioregion, Monongahela National Forest, where clear cutting beyond sustained yield capacity and managing the forest on short rotations as mere tree farms was finally prohibited, but not before hundreds of thousands of acres of land was clear cut. There's another book, and I think this book is going to become the silent spring of our time. It was written in 2021 by Susan Simard, and it took me into the intimate world of trees, where trees are not simply the source of timber and pulp, but are a complicated, interdependent circle of life. That forests are social, cooperative, interdependent bioregions, and they're connected with underground networks by which the trees actually communicate their vitality, their vulnerability, with communal lives that are very similar to our own. I do predict that this book will someday change a lot of hearts and minds, just like Silent Spring. At least I hope so. The details about forests and the life in our lumber camps of Pennsylvania came from the book Wood Hicks and Bark Peelers. These photographs were discovered in a barn, and they give a photographic story of the lumbering industry in northern Pennsylvania, right before my trilogy was written. But I was granted to use one of the photos in this book, which depicts the life of the lumber camps. You can see that. That's the back cover of my second book. In the second book, my protagonist goes into these primitive and dangerous lumber camps, and she takes care of the very wood hicks that are destroying her beloved forest. How's that for irony? How's that for struggle? And although my story takes place in central Pennsylvania, I took the liberty of taking these stories and this culture from northern Pennsylvania, and I superimposed it on Juniata County. The mountains of Juniata County might be little baby ones compared to up north, but the impact of clear cutting is still the same. There's another book, and I don't have it right now. It's called Evergreen: Saving Big Forests to Save the Planet. It essentially talks about 5 big forested bioregions that have a major impact on climate change and in saving the planet. There's only one of those large bioregions in North America, and that's in Western United States and up through Canada and Alaska. The second theme of my book is racial. A second protagonist is Native American. Her name is Baxo Strait, and she is of the Iroquois Nation, more correctly called Haudenosaunee, which means people of the Longhouse. In my story, Baxo Strait teaches Rebecca how to use plants and trees and shrubs for healing, like her people have done for thousands of years. And one of the reasons I chose to do this is because the forest is an ecosystem. It's not just trees. And because many of our modern pharmaceuticals still come from plants and shrubs and trees. So the more they're destroyed, the more we are losing the healing capacity of those plants. The next theme that I chose was socioeconomic. Think about it. The lumber baron and his attorney build summer homes right outside of McAllisterville. And by the way, these homes are still there. And every time I would drive by, I would think, I wonder who lived here. I wonder what they did. Well, I guess that they were lumber barons and they were from Philadelphia. And I could weave them, and the difference in lifestyle between their lives and my protagonist. She becomes friends with their daughters, and they allow her to see what wealth is like, with servants, lovely homes, beautiful clothing, no responsibilities, and above all, privilege and education. And when she goes to Johns Hopkins training school for nurses, as it was called at the time, she lives in an opulent nursing home. And she meets a young physician there who also shows her how the finer things in life, so to speak. Remember, back in Juniata County, she comes from living in a log farmhouse, no electricity, no running water, no telephone. So it becomes very apparent to Rebecca that she may have to choose between these two worlds. The third theme is gender. This one is near and dear to my heart. As a nurse who worked in women's centers and in women's health for a long, long time, I know a lot of stories that women have told me through the years. Looking back to 1898 and into 1900s, there were so few opportunities available for women at the time. You could be a farm wife, a teacher, a domestic, or remain single and be a spinster and live with your parents. Men held all the power in relationships. Women were expected to be subservient and remain within their traditional roles: housewife, mother, helper. And it was assumed that education was not necessary for a woman because they would just remain in the home. And even if a woman excelled in her schooling, she frequently had to stop going beyond 8th grade, especially if she lived in rural areas. This was true for my own mother and my own father. They were needed to work on the farm, and my mother was hired out to give money home to her parents to sustain the family. Also, attitudes were that women were also intellectually inferior and not capable of complex thinking or mathematical calculations. So I have some of that in there after the barn burns down and they need to rebuild it. And she figures out how to do it. Mercy be. There's also an issue of homosexuality. While in nursing school at that time, Rebecca learned that homosexuality was a mental disease. So when her brother tells her that he has feelings for another man, she becomes distraught and confused. Here's another conflict that runs through the story. She warns him that he will be shunned, persecuted, rejected by his neighbors, his friends, his family, and particularly the church. I chose to address that because the Native American Back So Straight sheds an altogether different view on homosexuality in her culture. And it really helps Rebecca work through her own conflict. Cultural issues. My ancestors were farmers. I spent my first 7 years visiting my grandparents on their farm, and I grew up with Pennsylvania Dutch culture. Large gardens, lots of homemade food that we grew and canned and froze, butchering pigs and chickens. Many of the stories within my story actually happened to my mother and grandmother. My mother and father, grandparents, aunts and uncles speaking Pennsylvania Dutch. Their work ethic, their loyalty to one another, their shame when they were called dumb farmers. My mother's maiden name was Wagner, so she was called Wagon Wheel, dumb wagon wheel. Their tendency, though, to be stubborn and stoic. Some people would call that bullheaded. I have been known to use that word once in a while. There's an account of a barn burning in my story, and that is based on a true story. I don't want to give away the plot, but there's a tragedy that happens that also happened to my family. The story about the copperhead snakes is a true story, also happened to my mother. I do have a picture, I think, that might really show you that era. That is my grandfather's farm after something happened to it. I can't tell you what. And those are his 2 white horses, which also play a prominent part in this story. By the way, my grandparents were named Mary and Joseph, just like in the story and just like in the Bible. So I had to put that in the book. Why did I write a story about this time period and this location? Well, as writers, we are told, write about what you know. Write about what you already know. All of us are writers. Everyone who's watching this podcast has a story to tell. Even if it's a memoir, even if it's just a journal to give to your kids. I remember the farm stories from my family, like I said, and I told them in my books. But I also wondered, what was it like, especially for a woman, to grow up in a very small rural town in the Juniata Valley, surrounded by mountains, before electricity and running water and telephones and all the things that we enjoy? And what was it like during and right after the height of the lumber industry right here in Pennsylvania, where small towns and hamlets and villages sprung up, especially in northern Pennsylvania, but also in central Pennsylvania, because of the wealth that was injected into those communities from logging, from sawmills, from clear cutting. And it also gave work to men outside the farms. And I learned that as a child, that farming just became unsustainable for many people, especially right prior to the industrial age. Also, Pennsylvania was the #1 lumber producing area in the world at that time, and a little bit before that time. There were immigrants from Eastern Europe and Ireland and Germany, et cetera, who came to Pennsylvania to work in the lumber camps. Then there's a question of why the Shade Mountains? Why not other mountains in Pennsylvania? Well, once again, I wrote about what I know. In 1976, my husband and I bought 15 acres of mountain land outside of McAllisterville, Pennsylvania, Juniata County. Our forest and surrounding 650 acres and bordering state forest land in Snyder County had been clear cut in the mid-60s. So we bought it 16 years later, and it looked like a train wreck. So I know what it looks like. There were spindly little sprouts from the tree trunks, and there were some tiny, tiny trees, as big as my wrist. But it was a young forest. But it had started to come back to life. Then in 1980, as a family, my husband, my 2 young daughters, and I, and a 15-year-old boy for a summer, we built a log cabin on that land. And for the next 42 years, we worked to finish it, but we roamed the forest and the dirt roads, and we looked at the wildlife, and we watched the forest change in 42 years from this very, very immature forest to a forest that probably now could be sustainably harvested. Many of my observations and experiences are in my novels. I saw some incredible things. I saw a corn snake go in the creek and eat a little native brook trout. I saw a squirrel go after a ruffed grouse and her little chicks. And I thought, are you carnivorous? Why are you going after these birds? But it did. And the mother ruffed grouse chase the squirrel away like a mother bear would have. But I saw things like this, and I watched the wildlife change. No more ruffed grouse are in our forest. Many of the birds are no longer in the forest. Others have taken their place, like a pileated woodpecker. Of course, we have lost the hemlocks. We had hundreds and hundreds of hemlocks that grew close to Tennis Run, our little native stream, our stream with native brook trout. All the hemlocks are gone. So all that deadfall is in the forest right now. And once again, it looks like it had been bombed. I'm hoping it comes back, but some of the stags are still standing where the trees fall off halfway when they're dead, and then the other half succumbs to the woolly adelgid later. So nature finds its way in my books, page by page. And I believe one has to spend time in the forest to really understand the beauty and the magic that is contained there. So what motivated me to write this story? Well, building the log cabin was the main catalyst, but I have always loved trees and nature. So it was a perfect fit. In addition, I was a naive 17-year-old woman who went to nursing school in a city. I had never seen a person of color or another ethnicity. I had never seen a naked man. I thought, these stories are so true and so vivid, they have to be in my book. I was also the first person to go beyond high school in my extended family. So I incorporated some of my own angst and experiences into the plot. And then I just embellished them a little bit to give it some flavor and conflict. But I also believe that my experiences in the woods, my vivid imagination, and curiosity played a part. I wove the fascinating things that I saw in the forest. Animals, birds, snakes, amphibians, things I didn't know existed, skinks. I think we have wood rats up there. I'm not positive, but I think so. Vernal pools, bogs, wetlands, rocky ledges where we had to be careful where we put our feet and our hands because of rattlesnakes. I already had a couple encounters with a copperhead, so I didn't need any more. I soon learned, after I started writing, I'd say 6 months, that I was so foolish and so naive to think I could write this book in 6 months or a year. But the deeper I went into it, I realized historical writing, even if it's fictional, has to be accurate. It's one thing to write fiction, but if the story contains inaccuracies and errors, your readers will see right through it, just as you would see right through it as the experts that you are. There are 3 places I went for on-site research. One was the Pennsylvania Lumber Museum. They were wonderful. That's where I found a lot of these books. The second was the Juniata County Historical Society. I had people there help me with research. I had to learn about the culture, the names, the places, the people to make it authentic. I hope that I have done that. I also went to the Alan Chesney archives of the Johns Hopkins Medical Nursing and Public Health to enable me to write the second half of the first book. And I have diaries, I have all kinds of intimate details about the life of a student nurse from 1898 to 1901. But I am also a nurse, as I told you. So a very young and unworldly God who suffered culture shock when I went into nursing school in 1958. I also had to include that in my story. I called upon my family of origins history, my experiences with them as Pennsylvania Dutch farmers. Like I said, a barn fire, snakes, family conflicts that turned ugly. I added the Native American not only because I wanted to bring forth the Native American respect for plants and trees, but because I've always been fascinated with Native American culture and the real story of our systemic displacement and ethnic cleansing of a whole race of people who cherished the natural world and protected it for thousands of years. Lastly, I need to tell you that I'm confessing because I have an overactive imagination. I am a keen observer. I don't miss much. But I believe that curiosity enables all of us to be surprised at what we can accomplish. And the Lancaster Conservancy is a good example of that. What you have accomplished is just remarkable. Then there's tenacity. And I hope you would agree that that's necessary for your organization too. Don't give up. Just keep preserving land, water, trails, and making Lancaster County a wonderful and beautiful and healthy place to live. So that's my story, and I'll stick to it.
You definitely should stick to it because it is a truly amazing story. And thank you so much for the encouragement. You know, it is really hard work protecting land. And
Yes.
our land protection team of 2 does an incredible job of doing that. Just, as exhibited by the new state park that was established, and announced just yesterday, right? I mean, that was our land protection team that was able to spearhead that in amazing partnership with the DCNR, with the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. Together we're able to accomplish great things. And then our stewardship team, takes it from there and works tirelessly alongside of literally hundreds of volunteers to manage these special places in the right way. And all of that is upheld by our development team of 2, to provide the funding that's needed for all that critically important work. So, Joyce, thank you again for the encouragement. Thank you for the truly amazing, what will be soon a trilogy. And you said at the beginning that you're not a forester, you're not an expert, but you 2 things. Certainly, your stuff. There's no question about that, right? But the passion that you bring to this, combined with your personal experience, your family experience, and the research that you did, really brings these books to life, and it makes them so timelessly relevant. Like when I was reading the books, I was really thinking about fracking right now. Because I saw parallels in the conflicts that you establish in those books to conflicts that I know friends are experiencing right now about, do we allow this on our land or not? And the financial strain is real. And so maybe can you comment a little bit more on that piece of the conflict, right? So even in the family, within the family, and I don't want to give the plot away, so maybe I should stop. but the conflict between cut or no cut, and there was disagreement there, and there was struggle there.
Yes. Rebecca's brother and her father were in a constant state of conflict. He was a farmer. He wanted his son to help him farm, but his son loved the forest, and he would go traipsing, as it was called, into the forest, go hunting, go fishing, loved the forest with a passion. And he felt his father held him back. So there was so much conflict continually between the two. And then Rebecca's caught in the middle, loving them both, wanting to take her brother's side, wanting to take her father's side. So that was the major theme of conflict. And the other one was, the other one, as I mentioned, was between the haves and the have-nots. Here's McAllisterville, this tiny little village, and it still is a sweet little town, falling on some hard times right now, as many small rural areas are. They wanted a telephone. They wanted modernization. They wanted tractors. The farmers wanted tractors. They were farming with scythes and sickles and horses and so forth. So they saw what the income from working in the lumber camps and lumber mills could do. They also saw that they had to leave their families behind. They had to, their wives and children had to farm while they worked in the lumber camps, etc. So there was a conflict within them, wanting to provide for their families, but wanting to save the forest. And that was true of Rebecca. Here she is, this amazing young woman who did something so amazing in 1898. There were only 9 nursing schools. So she had to take the train back and forth, and was in for a huge culture shock going into Baltimore, stinky, smelly, not loud, not many trees, people of different ethnicities and color. She was really shocked. But she also saw how wealth changed lives, particularly opportunity. So she was in a horrible conflict between wanting to help the farmers, but also saw the horrific accidents and tragedies that happened in these lumber camps. So she decided, maybe I can save some lives. Maybe I can prevent consumption, which is tuberculosis. Maybe I can prevent tetanus. Maybe I can prevent life-threatening hemorrhages. So she embeds herself in these lumber camps with these wood hicks, as they call themselves. So her internal conflict was so great, wanting to save the forest, but working for the very people who were destroying the forest. So yes, lots and lots of conflict.
Yeah, and I really love the way you described that it's a love story
It is
with
the love
Rebecca and the
story.
forest, right? And how much she
Yes.
really, and it's so obvious in her dialogue, in her character, how much she truly, deeply loves that forest.
Yes.
And it's really amazing to me that then she does return to work to help the people that are destroying the forest that she loves. And so she loves people as well. So it's not like she's just loving the ecosystem and throwing people away. She loves them both. And that struggle is apparent, that, you know, she's loving these people enough to live in a really dangerous situation, and to try to preserve their health,
Yes.
even though doing that results in
Yes.
the forest getting cut down.
Yes.
Right. So what an intense struggle.
It is. Well, she took an oath. She took the Nightingale Pledge when she graduated in front of all of her teachers and her family. And she took it to heart. That was her oath. So when she encountered these horrific amputations and pieces of wood and splinter going in the eye or the ear. She saw that when she worked for the town doctor. He was patching them up all the time. So she thought, I took an oath. Maybe I can do something more than just patch them up and watch them die. So yeah, she took her oath extremely seriously.
Yeah. And then, you transitioned to talk about your cabin and your 15-acre patch of woods and how you watch that recover.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And to the point where you think it might be time or it might be ready for sustainable harvest. So you're not anti-logging.
I am not.
Yeah.
Of course not.
Right. Logging is actually a really important management tool for forest management.
Absolutely
Right?
is.
But done the right way.
Yes. Sustainable
right.
harvest.
Yeah, sustainable forestry, absolutely. And there's there really is a great initiative in Pennsylvania for sustainable forestry. And I hope Eric Roper, our forester, will talk about that in our next Nature Hour in 2 weeks. But that reminded me of something. So I snorkel rivers and streams, kind of a strange thing. And I'm snorkeling this river out near your cabin, I don't know where your cabin is, but I know the general area. So I'm not too far from there. And it's this beautiful stream and it's this clear water and the bottom is silt free. And it dawned on me that 150 years ago, that was not the case. This was likely sediment choked because of the clear cut, right? But it recovered just like your forest. That when you took ownership of that in the mid 70s, from the 1960s clear cut that was not done in a sustainable way, you were able to see that recover. And you made a statement that nature finds its way. And I think there was a line in Jurassic Park along the same lines. And I've seen that multiple times where, if we just give nature half a chance, she'll recover. The ecosystem will recover.
It will heal itself. My fear now, watching that stream, it's called Tennis Run, is that it has almost been a trickle. The drought is affecting it. It is spring fed. We have a small pond that is spring fed. And I'm just so sad to see that there's barely any water coming out of that spring. And our little native brook trout, I don't know what they do when there's just such a small amount of water.
Yeah, there's a bit of research going on with brookies right now. That's certainly one of the worries I have among multiples, but climate driven ecosystem changes and is the climate changing so fast that the ecosystem just doesn't have enough time to keep up or doesn't have the chance to keep up and adapt, right? There was a researcher at Penn State, Shannon White, getting her PhD, and I assume she's done by now. Just an amazing researcher, and she did some extensive research on brookies and found out that they actually move quite a bit of distance to find the right conditions for them, as long as we remove blockages to their migration, which are often associated with unsustainable forestry practices. Right?
Yes.
So
yes.
Logging roads that are poorly constructed, culverts that are poorly constructed, will all restrict that brook trout movement. But as long as we eliminate those blockages, they will find the right space, the right place that they need within that river system to sustain themselves. And so that's hope. And that's one of the messages that I got from this, is there's hope here, right? This is not doom and gloom.
I hope so. I think it was a double whammy because of the hemlocks. And of course, we have so many hemlocks back in that Shade Mountain area because there are streams and runs and Lost Creek, for example, and so forth. And when we lost the hemlocks, I know that I don't know if the temperature of the runs and streams were elevated to a dangerous extent, but I know that there's a lot more sunlight coming in there.
Yeah, and that'll definitely increase the temp. And there's still some work going on to figure out exactly what that threshold is. That stress threshold for brook trout. It's a little bit of an uncertainty.
I know, they're so beautiful.
They are beautiful.
When
And
you
breeding
walk,
season's coming in.
they just start around. And they're just so beautiful.
And they're putting on their breeding colors right now. So they're beautiful all year long. But boy, in the fall, when their bellies and their fins turn red, it's just spectacular. They're swimming sunsets.
I hope there's enough water for that.
Right. As long as there's water for them, definitely.
Yeah.
You said we'll wrap this up here in a minute. You said a couple of things. You said so many things that were really profound. I can't keep up with them all. But one of the things you said that's a nice plug for us is spend time in the forest to really see the beauty, right? And you've hiked that land that for
Yes,
45
yeah,
years now, I think, right? And so
close
you get to
to it.
know it, but you never ever really know a place. I don't think like that. I think like in my experience, I could be on a particular creek or a particular patch of forest for decades, and every time I go out, I find something
It's
new.
new.
Yeah. And so
It's
we've got a number of interpretive hikes coming up this fall. And so I encourage folks to go to our website and click on the events tab and learn about what those interpretive hikes are, so you can learn more about these beautiful places that we protect. And to your point, what you just said, every time, in my experience anyway, every time I go out, it's new. You have the same thing.
absolutely. It never ceases to amaze me and to I want more. I just want more time.
Yeah.
And the 7-year journey to write this book took away a little of that time, but not all of it. And I'll get back to it. But
Yeah. That's
yeah.
awesome. So what's next? Are you going to do another trilogy?
No. 7 years, and sometimes I just really thought that I was a little loony, but the story was there. It was such a strong urge for me to tell the story and to do it in a way, I hope, that brings people to appreciate and believe how important our forests are and our trees are, that life will not be sustained without them.
Yeah, definitely. And I wrote a book. I wrote two, and so I understand the struggle in the 7 years, because that's how long it took me to write them. So I get it, and it's kind of ironic that they're both about outdoors, and yet I'm not
Yes.
out there doing it. I'm inside writing. But you've done a beautiful job of this, really, truly beautiful. And so thank you so much for the 2 books that are complete. And I look forward to the third one about to come out in November very much, so I can finish the trilogy. And you've got a couple of book signings coming up, right?
I do. I have one in McAllisterville. I'm so proud
Excellent.
of. Double B Farm Supply. That's on October 1st. And I have a book signing at Barnes and Noble in Camp Hill, and that's on October 8th from 2 to 4. So I'm beyond grateful.
That's
grateful.
amazing. And so I definitely encourage folks to get out to those book signings and meet Joyce in person.
I'd
Kelly
love
just posted in our chat. Kelly just posted a link to those book signings, and a link to your book availability on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and BookBaby. So you can find Joyce's work again at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and BookBaby, and go on out to those book signings and say hi to Joyce. So thank you so much for the great work, for the amazing books, for the inspiration, and for spending your evening with us, Joyce.
My pleasure. Were there any questions from?
We didn't have any questions from the viewers.
Okay.
But you were really thorough going through it. I think you answered them all as you were going.
I must have done a great job.
You did an excellent job, and I very much appreciate all.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.